Hey everybody, welcome back to Retrospect. Today's video I'm going to be painting another piece in my Splice series. This one I just called Duck, Donald. I'm not the best with titles. So the first step I'm going to be doing is making the carbon paper or the tracing paper. So basically I just take a printout of my piece, the way I want it to appear on my wood panel, and I think this is like an 8B pencil on the back, so it makes a transfer paper. And then I tape it down exactly how I want, making sure the top of the painting is at the top of the wood panel. And now it's just a matter of taking a very hard pencil or even a pen. The pencil I'm using right now has H lead in it, so it's pretty hard and won't get all dusty. And I just trace over all of the aspects of my image, and they will transfer over to my wood panel. There's my dog in her usual spot. She likes to cuddle up in my lap with blankets. She doesn't seem to mind being smushed though. I like to flip it back a couple times to make sure I've gotten everything. And I did actually forget the little nostril in the beak in the second part, but that was an easy fix. So now what I'm doing is just the longest task is just filling in all the flat colors. And what I'm really focusing on is making sure the consistency of my paint is liquidy but not too runny. The tape I'm using is pretty good about keeping stuff crisp and sharp. I do occasionally get a bit of stuff bleeding under, but that's an easy fix as well. So as you can see, I've got my little paint pot there, and that's my pre-mixed color so that I can come back to this and make any touch-ups I need to without having to mix the same color again from scratch. Some of the colors that I mixed, especially this light grayish color here, the pigments separated a little bit when they dried. I'm not exactly sure why, but you can see sort of dark patches on those two sections I've already done. And I'm just going to try to paint over that. And usually it's an easy fix of just painting over lightly. But yeah, for some reason they like to separate. I think it must be something to do with just the individual pigments in each type of paint that I'm using. They were all the same brand, they were all whole beam, but what do I know? I found these tweezers at my parents' house when I was home for Christmas, and they are amazing. I mean, I could have bought tweezers anywhere, but these ones I already had. But they're really great for picking up tape without getting your nails everywhere and trying to pick it up like that. So they're just, they're not necessary, but they make it a little easier, I find. Yeah, this blue color also did that weird separating thing, just a little bit. The tweezers are also good for plucking little hairs that are attached to tape or get their way into your paint. I'll have all of the supplies that I've used listed below in the information box if you're curious. Just my standard ones. Nothing new or exciting on this piece. Now, I usually do the black outlines at the very end, but in the case of this section right here, it's already taped off and it's kind of like an isolated little snippet, so I started the black lines there before I'd done the rest of the color. But it really depends on the layout of your piece and the type of separations you have. I mean, I'm just assuming that anyone watching my videos is interested in how I make art, so this is all based on my style of paintings, the composition and visual look that I'm going for. So obviously your paintings will be different than mine, so your approach will be different, but this is just what works for me and what I really fall back on to make the paintings look the way I want them to look. So here's another little section that I was talking about. It needs to be sort of isolated, so that's why I tape it off. And then I'm going back in and finishing up the last colored spot on Donald Duck's eyeball and going in on these white chevrons. So the reason I separate them is because some of these pieces are little square sections of other images collaged on top of the existing image, so it's important for me to have that sort of visual separation. There's a little bit of a seam between two pieces of colors that have been taped off in my work. Like right here, when I take the tape off this area, there'll be a seam from the tape section to the non-tape section. And that's just something that is important to my visual aesthetic. Visual aesthetic is redundant, isn't it? Possible. The black outlines take probably the longest part, but they're the most satisfying part. They really bring everything together and just makes everything pop. See, here I am adding that little nostril thingy. Mostly looks the same as the other one. So now I'm taking off the tape, and again, those tweezers are so helpful, and I'm getting a little bit of bleed in areas, but that's not a big issue. Normally, if I were doing something like these chevrons, I would tape off the black section so that that would have nice crisp lines, but for some reason I just didn't feel like that this evening when I was painting it, so I did it with a very fine brush. And because I used the fill method for the white areas, it dried to sort of a raised edge, and that made kind of a guideline for my brush, so it didn't really have any issues with it bubbling over the edges. So the lines still look pretty crisp. And then any spots that I did go over the edges, I just touched up again with white paint afterwards. Just like that. And here I am just doing some more touch-ups. The smile on his beak was a little wobbly, so just making that line smoother and more even throughout its length. And then the very final bit is just these little colored splotchy dots that I added on. Of course, I always have to be careful not to put my hand in any sections of wet paint, so always pay attention to what's still wet when you're painting, because I have definitely smudged things in the past. And what you don't see is that I took the tape off the edges of this piece at the end without filming it, so we missed out on that satisfying section. But there was a few small areas where I had to sand down a bit of the paint. Just in that blue section right there, actually, I think there was a bit of bleed. But other than that, it was nice crisp edges. And that's the final product. I hope you enjoyed watching me paint this, and I will see you in the next video. Toodaloo!